Hamas says it will only release an American Israeli and the bodies of 4 other hostages if Israel implements their ceasefire agreement. The terror group calls it an exceptional deal aimed at getting the truce back on track. A senior Hamas official says that the long-delayed talks over the ceasefire second phase would need to begin the day of the hostage release and last no longer than 50 days. Israel would also need to stop barring the entry of humanitarian aid, which was cut off 2 weeks ago. Israeli Citizen Spokesperson Asher Westropp-Evans joined us earlier today for more on the negotiations.
Well, I don't want to speak for Hamas specifically in this instance because they have their own sort of ways of obfuscating, and we're not necessarily hearing from them directly. What I will say is a proposal that was seemed to be on the table for a little while there was the idea of giving one U.S.-Israeli living hostage that remains, Eden Alexander, and the other 4 deceased American Israeli hostages, and exchanging them on behalf of some additional Palestinian prisoners to be released from Israeli prisons, and of course to extend the ceasefire for a period that was not yet determined and not yet finalized, a certain period. That's been widely regarded as a non-starter by Israel, and even Steve Witkoff, the U.S. envoy, has not talked about that decision favorably. What was being proposed now is a bridging proposal, not even going into the full phase 2 proposal, is the release of 11 living hostages, which would most likely include Eden Alexander, in exchange for an ongoing ceasefire in the meantime, to take us through to the end of the Passover holiday period here in Israel, and of course the end of Ramadan, as a sort of period in order to keep going and give a little bit more time for the phase 2 negotiations to continue. Look, I mean, from Israel's perspective, at this point, the hostages must be returned. All remaining hostages, obviously a preference given to the suspected live 24 hostages, 24 young men that are still believed to be alive. But, there are 59 hostages still remaining. They need to be returned. They need to be brought back. And this is not a case of picking and choosing at this stage. But more importantly, it's about getting, a significant number back and not allowing Hamas to dictate the terms here. As a terror organization, as a terror army holding these hostages, we can't allow this sort of obfuscating and game playing to continue. We know for a fact that Hamas understands clearly that these hostages, the ones that they still hold, particularly the living hostages, but unfortunately also the deceased hostages that they hold ransom, are being held as an insurance policy for Hamas so that they can continue to build, they can continue to dig tunnels, and they continue to re-establish their power and grip and control in Gaza and beyond. And that's what they'd like to see go on for the future. This cannot continue in dribs and drabs and dribbles. There must be something more substantial. And if we're to talk about anything like a meaningful phase 2 deal, which starts to see Israel pull out in its entirety from the Gaza Strip, and or any sort of reconstruction plan, whatever form that may ultimately take, it needs to be in exchange for all the remaining hostages.